F1 is back again. It is the end of the next triple header, and this time we head to Brazil. What's going on, guys? Welcome back. We're here to make our predictions for the 2024 Brazilian Grand Prix. F1 is coming off of a very exciting and eventful Mexico City Grand Prix last weekend out. We saw Carlos Sainz win, a Lando Norris P2, and a Charles Leclerc P3, with Max Verstappen being the talk of the town last weekend when he had garnered 20 seconds worth of penalties when he was battling Lando Norris at the start of the race. Now, with very little time to breathe and absorb what we just saw, F1 is already back. The weekend is right around the corner, and this time, Brazil, Interlagos, sprint weekend, and we're here to talk about it. We're going to be making our predictions for what we think is going to happen this weekend in Brazil. We're going to be talking about our biggest positive surprise, our biggest disappointments, our qualifying top three, which, just because it's a sprint weekend, this is our Grand Prix Sunday qualifying, our sprint winner, our race podium, once again, Grand Prix on Sunday, race podium, and then we'll finish things off with our one crazy prediction. Now, as you'll see across this video, along the bottom of the screen, you'll see my community's predictions. If you're interested in having your predictions included in the video and joining in on our little championship that we have amongst our small little community here for predictions for F1 weekends, you can head to the link down below, join the Discord, and then leading up to every Grand Prix weekend, I'll make a call for these predictions, and we're able to talk some smack, see who gets them right, see who gets them wrong, and at the end of the season, we'll see who comes out on top. Let's go ahead, let's jump on into this with our biggest positive surprise. Let's kick things off with our biggest positive surprise, and I'm not going too far from the top of the grid because I feel like the choice here is obvious. We're sticking in the Scuderia Ferrari, but this time out, instead of Carlos Sainz, who just had his good weekend last weekend, we're going with Charles Leclerc. Now, I know what you're saying. He's been doing very well. He just won the US Grand Prix. You were there, you saw it live. That's right, and I think that this biggest positive surprise is not about his current run of form. It is about avenging his last season's DNS in the Grand Prix when he lost hydraulics on the formation lap and crashed. Now, obviously, I think it's going to turn around quite a lot, and if it doesn't, boy oh boy are Tifosi going to be absolutely rabid online. But I think this is set up perfectly for Charles to continue to have good weekends. I think he could take the step that Sainz did last weekend and kind of take it for himself this weekend. Charles also usually does very well around Brazil when he actually gets to compete. And I think there's going to be an instance in which we're going to continue to see Max and Lando kind of go at each other like we saw in Mexico, kind of opening the door. And as we even heard Charles mention it, as long as Max and Lando are fighting each other, that opens the door for him to kind of step through and take those results. I think this could be a weekend where we see something similar with Charles coming out and finishing very, very well on the weekend. So there you have it. My biggest positive surprise, Charles Leclerc. Let's move on ahead to our pick for biggest disappointment. And I've come to terms with the fact that for biggest disappointment for me, it kind of exists and subsists entirely on vibes for me. Like, very rarely will I actually be able to come up with a concrete reason for picking a team or a driver for this category. And this weekend is the epitome of that, where I feel like this team has kind of been riding a little bit of a high in terms of their performance the last two Grand Prix, but at the same time, they're not quite overperforming quite to the level that would warrant this necessarily. But this one, entirely vibes. I'm going with the French outfit, Alpine. I think this could just be setting up for a vibes weekend, sprint weekend in Brazil, inclement weather possible. I think this could set up for a very interesting weekend where we might get a classic Ocon versus Gasly weekend if they manage to find themselves running next to each other all weekend long. Obviously, Gasly has been running very, very well. He's qualified very well the last two Grand Prix weekends and even finished in the points last weekend. I think this could be a very interesting one. I don't know how the Alpine is going to perform around Interlagos, but at the same time, this is a vibes pick. It always has been, and I for one are going to be watching that French team very, very closely. Before we move on to our Grand Prix qualifying, if you haven't already, subscribe down below. We love talking about F1. We love talking about racing in general, sim racing, real life racing. We do a little bit of everything around here, and we'd love for you to join our little community as we continue to push towards 250 subscribers and more in the future. Also, leave a comment down below what your predictions are going to be for this weekend as well. I would love to see what you guys think is going to happen. And as always, if you made it this far into the video and you're enjoying it so far, consider leaving a like rating. It really helps me out. But let's go ahead. Let's move on ahead to our qualifying top three. Grand Prix Sunday qualifying. Saturday afternoon. I think this is going to be a very, very fun one. Brazil qualifying always seems to do very, very well, and I think this could be another instance where it's going to be a banger from start to finish. Let's start with my pick for P3 in qualifying here in our top 3, and I'm going for Max Verstappen. I think this is definitely going to be one of those cases where Max is going to be putting in very, very good times, but just might not have the car performance to overcome its shortcomings as we've seen over the last Grand Prix weekends. I think this could be a very good opportunity for Max to continue being very good at qualifying, and it'll be very interesting to see how the race would go after he finishes qualifying P3, because that should, I believe, give him the inside line into turn 1, in which we all know only good things happen down the inside of turn 1 in Brazil. So could be very interesting. I think Max is going to do well enough to qualify well, and I think it's going to do very well for him to do so, because in P2, I have qualifying Lando Norris. I have Lando qualifying P2 again. Obviously, the McLaren still very, very strong. We saw them perform here pretty decently last year, and I think we could see it again. I think Lando is going to be itching to continue his run of form that we saw in Mexico, where he was chasing down the Ferraris after tangling with Max until about lap 30 or so at Mexico. And so I think Lando is going to want to perform very well in qualifying, give himself the best opportunity to get out ahead and not even have to deal with Max if he doesn't have to. That said, I think they're going to start pretty darn near close to each other here in this one. I do think it's going to get spicy, and I, for one, am seated for it. Well, maybe not right now, but I will be seated for it on Sunday. And then finally, my pole position in Brazil is a driver who I've mentioned already. It's redemption year for Charles Leclerc, taking pole position there in Brazil. I think it's going to be an opportunity for Charles, who's very, very good at qualifying in a Ferrari that all of a sudden has shown tremendous pace. This is also going to be an instance in which we'll have an entire sprint qualifying session and sprint race for Ferrari to gather data and try and optimize the car as best as possible. And after a weekend that has already yielded a practice session, sprint qualifying, and a sprint race, I think Charles is going to know exactly what the car is going to be like, and I think he's going to be able to extract the maximum out of it under one of the most fun qualifyings on the calendar. I think he'll do well enough, and I think it's going to be his opportunity to drive off into the distance while Max and Lando fight it out behind. All right, we can't move on to race podium just yet because it is a sprint race weekend, and that means we need to make our prediction for sprint winner. Now, hear me out, right? I think this is going to do best for the championship for all persons involved. I think it's going to be maximum excitement for the fans, and it's going to be maximum excitement for the weekend in itself. My pick for sprint winner this weekend is Lando Norris. I think this is going to be an instance in which Lando is going to come extra prepared for the sprint race, and I think he's going to want to put it on pole in the sprint and continue to win. And while I don't think he's going to get the maximum amount of points that he could in the sprint, I think every point is going to matter to him at this point, and I think it's going to be a case where Lando needs to get back on the top step, needs to regain a little bit of that edge that he's got, and I think he gained a little bit of confidence in Mexico last week, and I think we're going to see it come out, especially in the sprint race. So Lando, congratulations, my pick for sprint winner. All right, let's do it. The moment we've all been waiting for, our race podium. Let's start in P3, and this is going to be another driver who is looking to avenge his performance in Mexico last weekend. I've gone for Oscar Piastri, finishing P3 this weekend. He's obviously had a bit of a tough time of it the last couple of weekends out, culminating in a Q1 exit for the first time all season last week in Mexico City. He ultimately charged all the way back up into P8, but I think it's going to be an instance of what we see exactly when Oscar is able to get comfortable in the car, get on the pace, and run the race that we know he can. While he has been on a bit of a downturn, it's only going to take one moment for it to flip the switch back on, and we'll see him back on the podium once again. I think it's going to be where it starts. He'll have another nice couple of week break after this to kind of get ready for Vegas and the rest of the season. But for now, it's going to culminate this weekend with a P3 in the race on Sunday. Alright, moving on to P2 in my race podium. I've gone for Charles Leclerc. Now, I know what you're saying. I can hear you all through your screens already. You're saying, Dakota, you just predicted Charles Leclerc as your biggest positive surprise, and now you're going to predict him to take pole position and finish P2? That's crazy. That's nonsense. And what I'll say to that is, while the Ferrari has been performing very, very well, I think the driver I have in P1 is going to be hungry enough to want to maximize performance after a couple of weekends where he's had to kind of be held down, whether that of his own volition or not. I think it's going to culminate into Charles P2. I think it's going to be more than good enough for him this weekend to really show what he's got, and it's going to be an instance where I think Ferrari is going to perform very well, but I just think another team and another driver are going to perform better over the course of the full race over on Sunday. Now that said, if there is inclement weather, I think this could be another instance where Charles is able to reestablish himself, but at the same time, I think P2 is going to be good enough, and I think that's where he's going to end up. Now that leaves P1, my race winner on Sunday. If you haven't guessed it already, I'm going for Lando Norris to win the Brazilian Grand Prix and Max Verstappen to miss the podium altogether. This goes based entirely on what we just saw last week in Mexico, where Max was really struggling down the stretch to keep pace, even lapping slower than Kevin Magnussen in the Haas down the stretch of the Mexico Grand Prix. Now, that said, I do understand that Max pitted relatively early. He was nursing his tires at that point. I don't think Kevin was ever obviously wasn't truly threatening, and Max also never really had an opportunity to push to try and catch the Merc, so he was for sure managing. But at the same time, I think it's come out that the Red Bull is not near the fastest car on the grid anymore. Max has to get everything out of it in qualifying just to do as well as he does, and with a 20-second penalty that we saw last week, probably might have just taken him out of it. But at the same time, this is a Red Bull that is not performing up to the standards that we've seen it last year and the beginning of this year. And I think it's going to culminate in a Lando Norris win and another opportunity for everyone to kind of look side to side and go, championship back on? Still on? Time will tell when it comes to that. But there you have it, guys. My race podium. A Lando Norris win, Charles Leclerc P2, and Oscar Piastri back on the podium in P3. All right, let's wrap this bad boy up. One crazy prediction time. And this one, we're going for a qualifying prediction. And now not a specific qualifying prediction, but a very specific qualifying prediction. We're going for the results of Q1. I think that what we're going to see in qualifying this weekend is going to be very exciting, and I think it's going to come down to microseconds up and down the board. My one crazy prediction is that P1 and P20 will be separated by less than 1 second in qualifying. Now, this is going to include a McLaren that is rapid, a Ferrari that might even be faster in qualifying trim, and a Sauber that might be the worst Formula 1 car I've ever seen in my short time watching Formula 1. But that said, there's something about Brazil that brings out the fire and the passion in these cars, and I think we're going to see a qualifying session for the ages where it really truly is just going to come down to meters and microseconds to see who's in and who's out making their way through qualifying. So there you have it, guys. My one crazy prediction: P1 and P20 in Q1 at the end of Q1 will be separated by less than a second. What do you think? Let me know down in the comment section below. Guys, there we have it. Our predictions are done for the Brazilian Grand Prix here in just a few days. What do you think of my predictions, and what are your predictions? Let me know down in the comment section below. I'd love to see what you guys think is going to happen. Again, if you haven't already, subscribe down below if you want to join our little community. We would love to have you. As always, turn on notifications so you don't miss a single upload. And if you made it this far, like the video. I would appreciate it, and it will really help us reach a wider audience. But guys, that is going to wrap it up for me here in this one. I hope you enjoy the Grand Prix weekend. I know I'm going to. Brazil is absolutely one of my favorites, and I cannot wait for it to get here. But guys, that is going to wrap it up for me here. We'll be back after the weekend is over to go over what we saw this weekend. I can't wait to talk about that. But first, the weekend's got to get here. But guys, that's going to wrap it up for me here, and I'll see you in the next one.